corporate India make of this budget this time around? Joining me is one of India's best-known corporate leaders, Adi Godrej, chairman of Godrej Group. Many thanks to you, Mr. Godrej, for joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Let me begin this conversation by asking you about the headline budget deficit numbers. Do you believe that the number that has been put out for fiscal 19 of 3.3% is credible and that fiscal consolidation has been seriously sort of committed to?
Yes, it's quite credible because revenues will be very strong next year, both GST and tax revenues, direct tax revenues.
What did you make of the budget overall, sir? Specifically, the focus that this budget has had on the rural economy. Do you believe that the kind of measures, particularly on increasing the MSP by 1.5 times, will give rural consumption a pop?
No, it won't be MSP increased by 1.5 times. MSP will be 1.5 times of the cost.
Yes.
So it's not going to increase by 1.5 times. I think that's a very good emphasis on rural India. Implementation will be very important. Rural India certainly needs a lot of attention. We've had several problems, especially with a couple of bad monsoons in the last 3 or 4 years. But I think if well implemented, it could create very good economic impact by increased demand from rural India. But what was disappointing was that the corporate tax rate across the board was not reduced. It was only reduced for small and medium companies. And it's very important that we be competitive in the corporate tax rate in our country. The US has reduced rates considerably this year. The UK has reduced rates this year. We have some of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. Now we are not competitive. And if we are going to attract investment, and if Indian companies have to compete across the world and in India, we need to have competitive corporate tax rates.
Point taken, sir. But if you look at this budget as a whole, do you think this is a growth-inducing budget?
No, I don't think it's a growth-inducing budget to a large extent. As I mentioned, corporate tax rates not being reduced is one of the causes. And I think I was also disappointed that there's been a long-term capital gains tax introduced on stock sales, shares and stock sales. When a few years ago we introduced a share transfer tax in lieu of that. Now we have both of them. I think it's wrong for the government to promise something like corporate tax rate being reduced and not implemented. I think it's wrong for them to have a tax introduced some years ago instead of one and then continue with both of them. So I think it is very important that the government sticks to what it has said or what earlier governments have said. I think it's extremely important.
What about the universal health insurance scheme as well, Mr. Godrej? The plan seems extremely ambitious, something that can be game-changing as far as, for protecting the health of a large part of the country that does not have proper health services. But the numbers seem a bit ambitious. 10 crore families, 5 lakh per family. Do you think he's got the enough resources to go ahead and fund it? What kind of shape or form will this take, you think?
It's an insurance scheme, so I'm not in a position to comment because I don't understand the insurance premium details well. But I'm sure they've consulted insurance companies and put the cost in their budgetary estimates.
One area of concern that you've been talking about for a while is private capital investment. Has there been anything done in the budget that sort of triggers corporate India to go start investing again?
No, I think that will take place if demand picks up. If the GDP growth rate improves to 7.5–8% next year, which I think is entirely possible if all the implementation goes well, then I think everything will come into place. Unfortunately, we had a relatively low GDP growth rate in the first half of this financial year. Second half has improved considerably, and I'm quite confident next year will be good.
What about the divestment process as well, Mr. Godrej? A target of about 80,000 crore has been set for next year, and they hope to do a little bit for in this financial year as well. Do you believe that that's been on the right track?
Well, this financial year they've done reasonably well. They will do about 100,000 crore. But I think this number is too small. The possible for divestiture is huge in India. It's no use holding on to these public sector companies. They should take quicker decisions, and I think they can do much more. Even this year they've exceeded their target, and I do hope next year also they will exceed the target.
What about the tax collections, Mr. Godrej? The FM began his speech with a fairly sort of sounding extremely confident about growth and tax collections. Whatever numbers that we have seen of GST collections so far have been relatively tepid. You've been a strong advocate of the GST. How do you believe that the tax collections have played out?
No, I think GST tax collections have been good. Why tepid? I think GST tax collections have been better than earlier anticipated, and they are on the rise. December collections were well above, say, October collection. So I think GST collections are rising, and they will continue to rise very well.
Okay, sir. I have one final question. Was there anything in the budget, Mr. Godrej, that you were expecting that did not happen? What according to you should have been done in this budget?
Yes, I mentioned corporate tax rate should have been reduced.
Okay.
Yes, I mentioned corporate tax rate should have been reduced. Yes, that's a major thing to make India competitive.
We leave it there, Mr. Godrej. Thank you so much for your time. That's Adi Godrej, Chairman of Godrej Group, reiterating that corporate taxation should have been brought down 25% across the board, and not just for companies that have a minimum threshold or a minimum turnover of 250 crore, a maximum turnover of 250 crores. Thanks for watching.